Hey there, guys. Adam with Adam Bro Fitness. All right, we're continuing with our fitness myth or BS series. The goal here is simply to try to bring a little light or tackle some of the fitness myths that are continually going around in the fitness industry. I do not claim to be the one who knows everything, but I do think I have the ability to shed a little light and maybe a little bit of context and nuance on some of the maybe dogmatism that we are finding in the fitness industry. Just so you know that the people I focus on mostly are people who are in the nonprofit space, churches, charities, things like that, who are working to help other people. And most of the people that I deal with are trying to do the best they can to invest in their health so that they can continue to do the good work they feel like they're supposed to do. So one thing that is very common, though, is especially in the social media space and the fitness space in particular, diet and exercise, is that there's so many camps now and there's so much religious fervor when it comes to diet. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the carnivore diet. It's a big deal right now. It's a big push in the fitness space, and to be honest with you, it is what it is. So the big concern I have, though, is people are saying that the best diet for human beings is the carnivore diet. And they will cite one or two small studies that kind of confer that humans may do better on, an all meat diet or all animal product diet. Now, my particular bent on this is much more middle of the road. I don't believe that there is one particular diet that is best for all people, and I reject anyone who finds help in a particular way. Let's say it's a vegan diet or a carnivore diet, and they find help for themselves, and then they blanket lay that across the human species, and they start finding studies and confirmation bias to support what they believe to be true. Nobody proselytizes like a vegan or a carnivore at this point, it seems. I wish the Christians were as fervent as some of these guys are. Now, do I have a problem with the carnivore diet? No. When is it useful? It's useful when you maybe are in the place where you have extreme food allergies, you have maybe extreme reactions to, let's say, FODMAPs or gluten or other like lectins and other sensitivities that people might have, dairy, things like that. If you are the type of person who is just dealt a bad hand in health, and you are, let's say for somebody like Jordan Peterson and his daughter Michaela, they both have very severe kind of autoimmune issues where the body is just hypersensitive. I think it could be called CIRS, which is chronic inflammatory response syndrome. They could be in this type of situation where pretty much everything sets off their immune system. Well, the carnivore diet in that sense would be an obvious choice because it's an extreme elimination diet. You just eliminate everything that could possibly be offensive to your immune system, and you work from that point. Does that mean everyone should do this? No, I don't. Absolutely not. Are plants good for you? There are reams and mountains of studies that show plants on the whole are beneficial for you. Some people are going to argue with that. Some people are going to argue against it. But the data speaks for itself. On the whole, plants are good for you. Now, I will say, I do think that plants are overhyped in a lot of ways, especially given some of the environmental situations we find ourselves in, where many of our plants are oversprayed with glyphosates and other chemicals that are just not good for the human body, and they're just you know, I don't have a particular study that says these things are bad for you, but common sense would tell me that if I spray these chemicals on things and it kills and runs away other organisms, why should an organism, ingest those same chemicals? It seems counterintuitive to me, but I'm not going to say science backs this up. I'm just not going to go that far. For me, I have found that eating more animal products makes me feel better. I personally feel better. Does that mean you should? Not necessarily. Should you try it? Why not? I don't see an issue with it. But there's plenty of data to show that plants are good for you too, that healthy fats, olive oils, avocados, all these other things are really good. Some people, even grains are okay for them. I find that grains, on the most part at this point, let's say gluten and beans in general, tend to cause some issues with a lot of people. And before someone would go carnivore, in my particular situation, like if you were working with me as a client, before I let you go carnivore or suggested it, I would probably put you on a low FODMAP diet to try to eliminate some of the obvious offenders for most people. Okay? So, carnivore diet, is it the ultimate human diet? I don't think so. Can you thrive on it? Absolutely. Is sadness going to be part of it? I think for some people it will be. For some people, they love the simplicity of it. For me, it's a sad way of eating because I like diversity in my food, but I wouldn't have a problem with it either. So, is it the ultimate human diet? I don't think so. You're going to have plenty of people, carnivores, people who have found help with this particular diet. They're going to try to probably fight me tooth and nail on this. But the big thing is I don't think diet should be religion. And I don't think that if you found help with one thing, you should lay that across the human species and then try to go back into like archaeological records and things like that and try to say, I think it's funny that, there are no cave paintings of salads. That's hilarious to me. But it doesn't mean that they didn't eat. It doesn't mean they didn't eat vegetables, like cavemen didn't eat vegetables. It just means they didn't draw paintings of vegetables, right? They did draw paintings of hunting, which was an awesome activity. So people are going to try to fight me on this, but the big thing is if we can step away from the hype of trying to convince others that my one way of thinking is the only way, I find we have much better discussions. There are people out there who want to eat this way. It's great. And I will say, I don't think, other than fiber and maybe some vitamins and minerals, I don't think plants offer something that animal products do not offer. I think it's the opposite way around. I think animal products offer a lot more on the health side of things than plants in general, but plants are delicious, and they also offer some great nutrients. They offer some good soluble and insoluble fiber that tends to be pretty good for the gut as long as it's not in excess. So I think for the most part, if you're going to try a carnivore diet or even an animal-based diet, which is pretty much what I do, you should have reason for that and not just look at TikTok or Twitter and just make a decision based off someone else's propaganda of it. I think you should have an informed idea, an informed, opinion. You should look up certain people who are maybe in that space. One person who I like in particular is Dr. Judy Cho. She is really good. She has a great podcast, and she's very open-minded about this. She did write a book called The Carnivore Cure, and her story is very compelling. She is a believer as well. Her story is extremely compelling, and I think in her case, it was what was needed. But is it every case? No, I don't think so. And I think anybody who tries to bend the science to fit a particular narrative is doing themselves an injustice and they're just being dishonest. You have other people like Dr. Sean Baker, who has been very outspoken against maybe veganism, and he's been a bit combative in that area. It's hilarious too in a lot of ways. But I think, he's the one who kind of popularized this carnivore movement about 6 or 7 years ago, and it's kind of taken off. And you know what? Hey, now he's got a market for it, and he's making tons of money off of it, and I don't blame him for it. And he seems to have great health, and he's happy with it. That's great. But it doesn't mean that everyone should do it. Just like being a vegan. It doesn't mean everyone should do it. People are all dying at the same rates. There's been no one diet intervention that is changing all-cause mortality across the board. People are still dying of heart disease at the same rates, whether you're vegan, carnivore, omnivore, doesn't matter. We're all dying at the same rates. So we have to stop acting like we found the Holy Grail and start using a little bit more of maybe nuanced thinking and a little common sense. If you're the kind of person, though, who has had a ton of issue losing weight, you've had issues maybe hormonally, you have tons of inflammation in your body, an elimination diet like a carnivore diet for 30 days could possibly be an intervention that you should consider. But remember, you consider it. You do some research on it. You don't just go listen to all of the carnivore people who are convincing you that this is the one thing that all humans should do. I mean, I've seen doctors who are like, humans are hyper carnivores, and that's all we should eat is nothing but meat and fat, which to me sounds delicious, but it seems intellectually dishonest in some ways, because there's just such a mountain of evidence to the contrary as well. Or at least on the other side of that hill, there's a lot of evidence, okay, that would say other things are good too. All right, so should you be carnivore? It depends on your context. Should all people be carnivore? Absolutely not. Should you proselytize for the one thing that helped you? I would probably say, if you're going to do that, do it with a sense of understanding and not zealotry. Do it with a sense of understanding that each person is an individual, and we are not bioidentical. We are biodiverse. Each person responds a little differently, and the context in which I grew up in makes my body express itself in a different way than each other person. So if you grew up in a home that was filthy and you kind of grew up in squalor, you're going to have a different situation. You were exposed to different things than someone who maybe grew up in a much cleaner home, who was exposed to, normal bacteria in a more moderate way. If you are the kind of person who grew up in a moldy, very toxic environment, then your body is going to respond very differently than someone who didn't grow up in that environment. So we have to take these things into consideration. We can't just say, well, from all the evidence that I've seen, and I've looked at the human digestive tract, that we are more like a wolf, and all people should eat steaks all day. Like, there's a couple of doctors I follow, they'll remain nameless, but one of them is like, you should eat one meal a day, and that should be basically a fatty steak every day. And that's it. And I'm like, okay, there's a lot of things being missing here, like total protein amount requirements for the body. What if I exercise? What if I already have an eating disorder? What if, I like other foods? Like, there's a lot being missing here. So I think taking the zealotry out of this and thinking in context is probably best. And I don't think that the human organism has a one-size-fits-all button. I just don't think that's the case. I think that we should all experiment. If I was going to give somebody a blanket place to start, It would not be a carnivore diet. It would be much more of kind of a paleo, kind of nutrient dense paleo diet, meaning lots of meat, lots of animal products, lots of veggies, the ones that are easier for you to digest, and maybe avoiding things like gluten because more people seem to be more allergic to it these days. I'm not sure why, it just seems so. Maybe dairy, depending on where you're from, especially if you're from, like, if you have Northern European descent, like myself, dairy doesn't really cause an issue. And then maybe beans, cutting those out for a little bit and just seeing how you feel. That's a great place to start. So lots of animal products, lots of vegetables, fruits, tubers like potatoes and squash and things like that. All those things are great for you. That's a great place to start. And then from there, you kind of find out where you want to move. All right. So I don't think that humans are necessarily carnivores. I think there are people among us who require that approach, but I don't think all of us require that approach. All right. So hopefully this adds a little bit of nuance to that discussion, but I call BS on humans are all carnivores. It's a myth. We are all different. We all have different needs, and we all have different contexts from which we come from and from which we now exist in. So pay more attention to your context, do a little experimenting with your own diet, find people who can advise you as you experiment, and walk with you. That's what you need. You need someone to walk with you, not just tell you what to do, because you, at the end of the day, are responsible for yourself, and you shouldn't just listen to some one person with blanket statements and one or two studies that are kind of out of context that, you know, are on a soapbox. So hopefully I don't sound like I'm on a soapbox. I try to be as middle of the road as I can because I don't particularly want to ascribe to any one thing. I want to try to be as useful as I can to as many people as possible, and be able to span the range of possibilities inside of diet to help people in different contexts, right? So I don't espouse any particular one. There are a few that I would say I would steer more clear of, and it's probably the extremes of those, which is the carnivore diet and the vegan diet. I would probably steer clear of those two extremes to begin with, and I would start somewhere in the middle, somewhere like an omnivorous kind of focusing on nutrient density, meaning I'm getting more nutrients for the calories I'm taking in, kind of paleo diet, maybe avoiding gluten, some dairy, and especially seed oils if we can help it. So that's probably where I would start. But hopefully this is helpful. Hope you have a great day. I hope your health is doing well, and I hope you are continuing to do whatever you can do to invest in your own health so you can continue to do the good work God's called you to do. All right? Have a good day.